December 1944. The world believed Nazi Germany was on the edge of collapse. After years of brutal fighting, Allied armies had crossed France, liberated Paris, and pushed deep toward Germany's borders. The once powerful German war machine was retreating on every front. But hidden beneath the frozen forests of Belgium and Luxembourg, a final desperate plan was taking shape. A plan that would become Hitler's last major offensive in the West. A plan known as the Battle of the Bulge. By the winter of 1944, Adolf Hitler knew Germany was losing the war. The Soviet army was advancing from the east, while American and British forces were closing in from the west. But Hitler refused to accept defeat. Instead of preparing for defense, he imagined one final strike that could change the course of history. His idea was bold, and almost impossible. German forces would launch a surprise attack through the dense Ardennes forest, split the Allied armies in half, capture the vital Belgian port of Antwerp, and force the Western Allies into negotiations. It was a gamble that depended on one thing: surprise. The Ardennes region was considered an unlikely place for a major attack. The terrain was difficult, the roads were narrow, and the winter weather was brutal. The Allies believed the area was too challenging for a large German offensive. That assumption would prove costly. German commanders secretly gathered nearly 200,000 soldiers, thousands of tanks, and artillery pieces under strict secrecy. They moved troops at night, hidden from Allied aircraft by thick clouds and terrible weather. The German plan was called Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine. Inside Allied command, confidence was growing. After the success of the Normandy landings and the liberation of France, many believed Germany no longer had the strength to launch a major attack. American forces were exhausted but advancing. Among the commanders leading the Allied war effort was General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of Allied forces in Europe. Eisenhower and his commanders faced a massive battlefield stretching across Western Europe. Their attention was focused on pushing toward Germany, not expecting a major enemy offensive in the quiet Ardennes sector. At 5:30 in the morning, the silence of the Ardennes was shattered. Thousands of German guns opened fire. The largest German offensive on the Western Front since Normandy had begun. American soldiers, many of them inexperienced troops, suddenly found themselves facing waves of German infantry and armored divisions. Roads became blocked. Communication lines were destroyed. Units were surrounded. The freezing weather made survival even harder. Snow covered the battlefield, temperatures dropped below freezing, and soldiers fought not only the enemy but also exhaustion, hunger, and the deadly cold. Yet the American defenders did not collapse. Small groups of soldiers held important roads and villages, slowing the German advance. In places like Saint-Vith and Bastogne, ordinary soldiers performed acts of extraordinary courage. The German offensive had achieved surprise, but it had not achieved victory. As the battle intensified, one town would soon become the symbol of American determination. A town surrounded by enemy forces. A town that refused to surrender. That town was Bastogne. Dramatic music rises. Snowstorm covers the battlefield. The Germans had launched their final gamble. But the Americans were preparing their response. And the battle that Hitler hoped would save Germany would soon become the beginning of the end. The Ardennes had become a battlefield of survival. By late December 1944, Hitler's final offensive had pushed deep into Allied territory. German forces had created a massive bulge in the Allied front line, giving the battle its name, the Battle of the Bulge. But the German advance was slowing. The surprise was fading. And American soldiers were preparing to make their stand. At the center of the struggle was the small Belgian town of Bastogne. The town was strategically important because several major roads passed through it. Whoever controlled Bastogne controlled movement through the region. German commanders surrounded the town and demanded that the American forces surrender. Inside Bastogne, the exhausted defenders faced impossible conditions. They were surrounded. They had limited supplies. They were freezing in temperatures that dropped far below freezing. But their answer was clear. They would not surrender. The defense of Bastogne became one of the most famous moments of the battle. The soldiers of the U.S. 101st Airborne Division, supported by other American units, fought against repeated German attacks. They endured constant shelling, hunger, and the bitter cold. They had little protection from the winter weather, but they held their positions. Their resistance became a symbol of determination when everything seemed lost. Meanwhile, General George S. Patton was preparing a powerful response. Patton's Third Army was positioned south of the German advance. When Allied commanders needed a breakthrough, Patton quickly turned his forces north toward Bastogne. Moving an entire army through winter conditions was an enormous challenge. But Patton pushed his troops forward. In just days, American forces launched a counterattack to break the German encirclement. On December 26, 1944, American forces finally reached Bastogne. The siege was broken. The defenders had survived. But the battle was far from over. German troops continued fighting, hoping to regain momentum. However, the conditions that had helped their attack were disappearing. The weather improved, allowing Allied aircraft to return to the skies. American and British air power began striking German positions, supply lines, and armored units. The German army was running out of fuel, ammunition, and time. Hitler's plan had depended on speed. But speed was no longer possible. The German forces had failed to capture Antwerp, failed to split the Allied armies, and suffered devastating losses. By January 1945, the German offensive had collapsed. The Allies pushed the Germans back to their original positions. The final gamble had failed. The cost was enormous. More than 100,000 German soldiers became casualties. American forces suffered tens of thousands of casualties as well. Thousands of soldiers from both sides lost their lives in one of the coldest and bloodiest battles of World War II. For the soldiers who fought there, the Battle of the Bulge was not about strategy or politics. It was about survival. It was about enduring impossible conditions and finding courage in the darkest moments. The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's final major offensive in the West. Instead of changing the course of the war, it drained Germany's remaining strength and brought the collapse of Nazi resistance closer. Just months later, Allied forces would enter Germany, and the war in Europe would come to an end. Today, the frozen forests of the Ardennes remain a reminder of the sacrifices made during those brutal winter days. A battle fought in snow. A battle fought in darkness. A battle that showed the world the cost of war. And the extraordinary courage of those who endured it. The Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last gamble, and the beginning of the final defeat of Nazi Germany.